The morning sunlight streamed through the hospital room window, gently illuminating Heather Williams' face as she lay in bed. In her arms, her newborn daughter Emma slept peacefully. Heather had just experienced childbirth for the first time, and the happiness she felt was beyond words. "I've never seen such a perfect baby," Heather whispered as she touched Emma's cheek. Her downy head, long eyelashes, tiny nose, everything was precious. Heather had been successful in the real estate industry, but the satisfaction enveloping her now was incomparable to any professional achievement. The door opened softly, and her husband Thomas entered carrying a large bouquet of flowers. He was an accomplished cardiac surgeon who worked at this hospital. Though signs of last night's emergency surgery remained in his tired eyes, pure joy radiated from his face. "How are my two angels?" Thomas placed the bouquet on the bedside table and kissed Heather's forehead. "Perfect," Heather smiled. "She looks just like you. The same blue eyes." Thomas picked up Emma, cradling her tiny body in his arms. Watching him gaze at their daughter with an expression that mingled a doctor's composure with a father's tenderness filled Heather's heart with warmth. "I'm sorry, I can't stay long today. I have 3 surgeries scheduled this afternoon," Thomas said apologetically. "It's all right. Your job is to save lives," Heather showed understanding, though deep down she felt a twinge of loneliness. She understood the importance of Thomas's work but also harbored a desire to spend this special time just with family. In the afternoon, Heather's mother Linda and her sister Karen visited the hospital room. Linda, a retired elementary school teacher with a warm, practical personality, picked up her granddaughter and said tearfully, "I remember the day you were born, Heather. I never thought I could feel this happy again." Karen had divorced 3 years ago and was raising 2 children on her own. As she celebrated her sister's new life, she seemed to be reflecting on the complexities of her own. "Being a mother is the most challenging but also the most wonderful experience in life," Karen said, squeezing Heather's hand. "If you need any help, just let me know." During this warm family time, Heather noticed Nurse Rebecca entering the room. Rebecca was an efficient and competent nurse. However, Heather sensed something unusual in the way she looked at Thomas. Her gaze lingered on him for just a moment, seemingly filled with complex emotions. Heather dismissed it as her imagination, attributing it to post-delivery fatigue. "Let me check on mother and baby," Rebecca said in a gentle voice as she began checking Emma's vital signs. By evening, Heather felt overwhelmed with exhaustion. After her family left, she fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke, Rebecca was quietly leaving the room. Oddly, Rebecca seemed to have a strange pattern of only coming into the room when Heather was asleep. As preparations for discharge progressed, Heather began to vaguely notice that some hospital staff looked at her suspiciously. She felt particularly uncomfortable when the nursing staff's demeanor subtly changed whenever Thomas came to the ward. The tension flowing between them was like an unspoken secret. "We'll be going home tomorrow," Heather thought as she held Emma. Everything appeared to be going smoothly, but seeds of anxiety had begun to take root in her heart. Thomas's unknown problems at the hospital, Rebecca's strange behavior, and the subtle changes in the staff's attitudes, they all loomed like dark clouds over her happy new life. As Heather gazed at the twilight sky visible from the hospital window, she tried to convince herself that these uncomfortable feelings were merely delusions born from fatigue. Tomorrow would begin a new life with her beloved family. Just thinking about it filled her heart with warm hope. Heather went to the bathroom in her hospital room to freshen up a bit. Her face in the mirror showed the fatigue of childbirth, but her eyes reflected a definite happiness. As she brushed her hair, she thought about her new life with her family starting tomorrow, the soft pink room prepared for Emma, breakfast times spent together as a family of 3, the days ahead watching her baby grow. Suddenly, Emma's cry came from the hospital room. Heather hurriedly put down her brush and opened the bathroom door. "Mama's here, Emma," she called. When Heather returned to the room, she found an unfamiliar white envelope placed next to Emma in the bassinet. It certainly hadn't been there before. Someone had entered the room while she was in the bathroom and left this envelope. Her heart began to race. Heather looked around, but there was no one in the room except for her and Emma. She slowly reached for the envelope. Nothing was written on the outside. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and pulled out a piece of paper. On it, a single line was written in bold black letters. "Abandon this baby now." Heather felt her breath catch. A cold terror ran down her spine, and her knees nearly gave way. Instinctively rushing to the bassinet to protect her child, an even more shocking sight awaited her. A thin red dog collar had been placed around Emma's neck. Oh my God! Heather felt the blood drain from her face. She frantically tried to remove the collar, but her hands were shaking too much to manage it. Finally getting it off, she lifted Emma up and held her tightly to her chest. The baby stopped crying and closed her eyes contentedly against her mother's chest. In a panic, Heather rushed to the door and pressed the nurse call button repeatedly. Seconds later, a young nurse appeared. "What's wrong?" Someone did something to my baby." Heather stammered. "Help, call security." The nurse's expression changed instantly, and she sprang into action. Within minutes, the ward was in an uproar, with security staff rushing in and the hospital director, Dr. Carter, appearing. While security guards searched the ward, Heather explained what had happened in a trembling voice. "There was a threatening note in the envelope, and a dog collar on my daughter. Someone came in while I was in the bathroom." Dr. Carter frowned and instructed that the envelope and collar be preserved as evidence. "We'll check the surveillance camera footage. We've also contacted your husband, Mrs. Williams." Heather was still shaking as she nodded, holding Emma tightly. "Didn't anyone see someone come in?" she asked the nurses. "No," the young nurse answered. "Someone has been at the nurses' station constantly for the past 30 minutes, but no one saw anyone enter your room." "What about the surveillance cameras?" "There are cameras in the hallway, but unfortunately, none inside the private rooms for privacy reasons," Dr. Carter explained. About 20 minutes later, Thomas burst into the room, breathless. His face was pale, and he appeared to have come straight from surgery in his scrubs. "Heather, is Emma okay?" He rushed to his wife and daughter and embraced them. "She's fine now, but someone—" Heather began trembling again. At that moment, she noticed a subtle change in the nursing staff's demeanor. As soon as Thomas entered, the expressions of several nurses in the room hardened, and they exchanged glances. Heather particularly noticed how Rebecca's eyes, watching from the nurse's station, turned cold. The police arrived and began their investigation. The surveillance footage only covered the hallway, but it showed that no one had approached Heather's room door during the 10 minutes after she entered the bathroom. This suggested the perpetrator was either an insider at the hospital or someone who knew the blind spots of the surveillance cameras. "For safety reasons, we're moving you to another room," Dr. Carter decided. "We'll also provide 24-hour security." Heather and Emma were transferred to a special room on a different floor of the hospital. Thomas canceled his emergency surgery and refused to leave his family's side. He was almost overprotective of Heather and Emma, watching every staff member who entered the room with suspicion. "Don't worry," Thomas held Heather's hand. "I won't let anything happen to you too." That night, Thomas slept on the makeshift bed in the hospital room, refusing to leave Heather and Emma alone. When Heather woke up in the middle of the night, Thomas was still awake, sitting vigilantly by the bassinet. While his determined presence reassured her, new questions were sprouting in Heather's mind. Was Thomas's extreme vigilance merely paternal instinct, or did he know something she didn't? And what did the nurse's strange reactions mean? From the darkness of the hospital corridor, Rebecca was quietly watching their room. Her eyes harbored a cold, determined light. The hallway lighting cast a momentary shadow across her face, revealing a complex expression mixing hatred and obsession. The next morning, Heather was officially notified by the hospital administrator that her discharge would be postponed. The police investigation was ongoing, and she would stay in the special room until her safety could be assured. Heather could only nod, feeling a mixture of disappointment and relief. "At least the security is good here," she murmured, stroking Emma's tiny head. Thomas left the hospital at dawn, saying he would go home to pick up necessary items. After he left, Detective Davis, a woman in her mid-40s, visited Heather. The detective, with a gentle yet sharp gaze, sat down and smiled kindly. "How is your baby doing?" Detective Davis asked. "She's fine, fortunately, no injuries," Heather answered. "I'd like to ask you a bit more about yesterday's incident. Is there anyone on the hospital staff who concerns you?" Heather paused thoughtfully. It was difficult to put into words the vague discomfort she had been feeling. "Nurse Rebecca concerns me a bit. She looks at Thomas differently. And she seems to only come into the room when I'm sleeping. Do you think there might be something between your husband and this nurse?" "No." Heather immediately denied. "Thomas is very honest. It's just that her attitude seems a bit strange." "I understand," Detective Davis nodded, taking notes. "Your husband has been working at this hospital for a long time, right?" "No, actually, he transferred here 2 years ago. Before that, he was at St. Joseph's Hospital." Detective Davis's expression changed slightly. "I see. Do you know the reason for the transfer?" "I think it was for career advancement. The cardiac facilities are better here." As their conversation continued, voices were heard from the hallway. A woman who seemed to be a veteran nurse was talking with a younger nurse. "Do you know what that doctor did at his previous hospital?" A scandal. Before coming here." The voices faded, and Heather couldn't catch the rest of the conversation. However, a new seed of anxiety had been planted in her heart. Had Thomas experienced some trouble at his previous hospital? He had never mentioned anything like that. Detective Davis soon left, and Heather was left alone with her thoughts. When Thomas returned, fatigue was evident on his face. "Are you okay?" Heather asked. "Yes, just tired," Thomas smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. That afternoon, Thomas left the room for an emergency surgery. While Emma was sleeping, Heather asked a nurse to watch her for a little while. She had something she needed to check. Heading to the hospital library, Heather began researching Thomas's past using a computer. The St. Joseph's Hospital website didn't offer any special information, but in an online forum for medical professionals, she found rumors about an ethical issue at that hospital 2 years ago. No specific names were mentioned, but the timing coincided with Thomas's transfer. Returning to the room, Heather watched over Emma with new questions in her heart. In the evening, when Thomas returned from surgery, he brought what seemed like good news. "We might be able to go home tomorrow. The police believe it's likely harassment from someone inside the hospital. But they don't have concrete evidence," Thomas explained. That night, while Thomas was taking a nap, Heather opened his laptop. Despite feeling guilty, she convinced herself she needed to know the truth. The password was their wedding anniversary. Opening the email inbox, she discovered a name, Rebecca Clark, in messages dating back 2 years. With trembling hands, she opened the emails and found intimate exchanges recorded there. "Last night was wonderful, Tom. When I'm with you, the world looks different. I've been thinking about you constantly. When can we meet again?" The dates of the emails were from right after Thomas and Heather had started dating. They weren't engaged yet, but they were already in a serious relationship. Heather's heart sank heavily. Thomas may have had an affair with Rebecca in the past. And now, this woman had appeared as her assigned nurse. The next morning, while Thomas was attending a hospital meeting, Heather made a decision. She needed to speak directly with Rebecca. Timing her move with the nursing shift change, Heather headed to the nurse's station. "I'd like to talk to Rebecca, please." Rebecca, with her cold blue eyes, visibly tensed upon seeing Heather. "Do you need something from me?" The two moved to a quiet corner of the ward. Heather took a deep breath and said, "I want to know about your relationship with Thomas." Rebecca's expression froze momentarily before changing to a cold smile. "You don't know anything, do you?" she said in a low voice. "You don't really know what kind of man Thomas is. Tell me. What happened?" "Ask him yourself," Rebecca said sharply. "The perfect husband, brilliant doctor, ideal father you believe in, you should see for yourself what lies beneath that mask." With that, Rebecca turned on her heel and walked away. Heather returned to her room with more questions than answers. That night, a night shift nurse brought Heather's dinner. Tucked under the tray was a small piece of paper. After checking her surroundings, Heather opened it. "This child is not yours." The handwriting was the same as yesterday's threatening note. Heather called the security guard, and Detective Davis quickly arrived. However, they couldn't identify who had placed the paper. The next morning, when Thomas returned to the room, Heather was determined to reveal everything. The emails with Rebecca, the strange threatening notes, and the rumors about trouble at his previous hospital. "Thomas, we need to talk honestly." Seeing his wife's serious expression, he paled. "About what?" "About Rebecca. About why you left your previous hospital. And what these threats mean." Thomas sighed deeply, looking out the window. "That's a minor issue from the past, Heather. I only want to think about you and Emma now. Let's get out of here soon and move far away. I have an offer from a hospital in Boston." "Are you running away?" Heather asked in surprise. "What are you trying to escape from?" "I'm not running away," Thomas said in a slightly stronger tone. "I just want to be with my family in a new environment." His words trailed off, and obvious anxiety flickered in his eyes. Heather could clearly see Thomas's agitation. He was hiding something. And it seemed deeply connected to the danger threatening their family. "Tell me the truth," Heather said quietly but resolutely. "We're family." Just as Thomas was about to answer, the door to the hospital room opened, and Hospital Director Carter entered with a stern expression. "Dr. Williams, I need to speak with you urgently." Thomas's expression instantly hardened. Heather sensed the tense atmosphere flowing between them. The conversation between the hospital director and Thomas was brief. Dr. Carter left the room with the same stern expression, and Thomas returned with a dejected face. "Discharge has been approved for tomorrow," he announced in a tired voice. "The police will continue their investigation at the hospital, but we can go home." "What's happening?" Heather asked. "I can't talk about it now. When we get home." That night, Heather repeatedly ruminated on the events of the past few days in fragments of sleep. In the morning, as she was packing, there was a knock at the door. "Come in." The door opened, and an older nurse entered. Martha, a woman in her 60s wearing that name tag, looked around cautiously before approaching Heather. "Mrs. Williams, take this." She slipped a small piece of paper into Heather's hand. "You deserve to know the truth." With that, Martha hurriedly left the room. The paper had the name, St. Joseph's Hospital, a date, and the name, Karen Foster, written on it. Before Thomas returned, Heather made a decision. She would go to that hospital without telling him. She headed to the nurse's station and told a nurse she wanted to go out for a bit that afternoon. "Does your husband know?" the nurse asked. "Of course," Heather lied. "He has surgery later, so I'm going out ahead." After obtaining permission from Detective Davis, Heather left the hospital. As she headed to St. Joseph's Hospital by taxi, she felt her heart racing. Something was wrong. Thomas was hiding something significant. At the reception of St. Joseph's Hospital, Heather inquired about Karen Foster. Miss Foster. She retired 2 years ago, but... Surprisingly, when the receptionist made a call, it turned out Karen still lived near the hospital and occasionally came in as a volunteer. And she happened to be at the hospital today. Heather met Karen Foster in the cafeteria. In her early 50s, she had a calm demeanor. "You're Thomas Williams's wife?" Karen asked in surprise. "Yes. You know him, don't you?" Karen sighed deeply. "Of course. His affair with Rebecca was famous at this hospital." "Rebecca?" Heather's heart raced. "Rebecca Clark?" "Yes. She was my close friend," Karen said sadly. "She and Thomas were in a passionate relationship 2 years ago. It was supposed to be a secret, but the whole hospital was gossiping about it." Heather raised her coffee cup with trembling hands. "But was that enough to make him change jobs?" "No," Karen lowered her voice. "Rebecca got pregnant. With Thomas's child." Heather gasped. "What?" "He initially said he would take responsibility. But by then, he was getting serious with you. In the end, he didn't choose Rebecca. He chose to marry you. And... the baby? She miscarried." "I think it was due to psychological stress," Karen continued sadly. "Rebecca became mentally unstable. She loved Thomas too much. Even after he abandoned her, she continued to obsess over him." Heather was speechless. With trembling lips, she asked, "And she transferred to Thomas's hospital?" Deliberately, Karen nodded. "She still can't let him go. And when she found out about your pregnancy..." All the dots began connecting in Heather's mind. The envelope, the threatening note, the dog collar. "She told me," Karen continued quietly. "I was as obedient as a dog to him. And yet I was abandoned. That's why. That's why the dog collar." Heather finished, trembling with fear. Karen nodded sadly. "She's still in treatment. But recently she became unstable again. Your childbirth might have been a trigger for her." Heather stood up. "I need to tell the police. She's dangerous." "Wait," Karen grabbed her arm. "What about Thomas? Did he tell you the truth?" "No, he didn't say anything. He's afraid of this situation too. Afraid that his past mistakes will affect the present." Heather left the hospital, overwhelmed by a mixture of confusion, anger, and fear. In the taxi, she called Detective Davis and relayed the information about Rebecca. "I'll return to the hospital immediately," the detective said. "In the meantime, absolutely do not take your eyes off your child." Upon arriving at the hospital, Heather ran from the elevator. On her way to her room, she saw nurses moving about frantically. Something was happening. When she opened the door to her room, a horrifying sight greeted her. Rebecca was inside, holding Emma. She stood by the window, holding Emma up as if showing her the view outside. "Rebecca," Heather called quietly. "Give Emma back to me." Rebecca turned slowly. Tears glistened in her blue eyes. "This baby should have been mine," her voice trembled. "I should have been the mother, but Thomas took everything from me." "I understand," Heather said, taking a step forward. "I understand that you're hurt, that you're angry. But Emma is an innocent baby. Where is Thomas?" Rebecca asked. "Do you want to see him?" "I'll call him for you," Heather suggested calmly. "But first, give Emma back to me." Rebecca looked down at the baby with a confused expression. Her hands had begun to shake. "I'm broken," she said tearfully. "He broke me." "You're not broken," Heather said gently. "You're just hurt. And that hurt can be healed." Commotion could be heard outside the room, but Heather didn't take her eyes off Rebecca. "Give Emma to me. Then I can help you." After a tense moment of silence, Rebecca's expression softened. She slowly handed Emma to Heather. "I'm sorry, really, I'm sorry." The moment Heather took Emma, the door opened, and police officers entered the room. Rebecca didn't resist and was quietly escorted away. 3 days later, Heather and Emma quietly checked out of the hospital. To avoid the media, they left through the back entrance early in the morning. When they arrived home, Thomas was sitting on the living room sofa, waiting for Heather. He sat with his hands clasped, staring at the floor as he began to speak. "It's time to tell you everything." That night, Thomas spoke candidly about his relationship with Rebecca. Their meeting, their passionate affair, and his fear and confusion when he learned of her pregnancy. Thomas had been a young, ambitious doctor. He admitted that concerns about his career and reputation had prevented him from making the right choice. "I hurt her then. And I ran away from that mistake," Thomas said in a trembling voice. "When she transferred to my hospital, I was terrified. But I couldn't tell you the truth. I couldn't admit my past mistakes." Heather listened in silence. Her heart was a tangle of anger and sadness, but at the same time, she felt a strange relief that all the truth was finally out in the open. "Don't ever lie to me again," she finally said. "We're family. We have to face any problem together." Following a psychiatric evaluation, Rebecca was diagnosed with a temporary mental disorder and sent to a state psychiatric hospital. Her treatment was expected to be long-term. As the seasons changed from spring to summer, Heather and Thomas gradually rebuilt their relationship while attending weekly counseling sessions. Regaining trust wasn't easy, but Emma's smile became the thread that held them together. "She's our hope," Heather whispered, gazing at Emma's innocent sleeping face. Emma grew healthily, and when she uttered her first "Mama," tears welled in Thomas's eyes. Meanwhile, Thomas had renewed his sense of responsibility as a doctor. He became a member of the hospital's ethics committee and emphasized to young doctors the complexity of relationships in the medical field and the importance of integrity. "By learning from past mistakes, we can become better doctors, better human beings," he often said in his lectures. A year after the incident, as Heather was preparing for Emma's first birthday party, a small package arrived in the mailbox. There was no sender's name. Opening it carefully, she found a small stuffed dog and a card inside. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. May this bring joy to your family. R." Heather stared at the card for a long time. She held the stuffed animal in her hand for a while, and after some hesitation, decided to place it in Emma's toy box. Regular letters of apology from Rebecca were forwarded by her psychiatrist with Heather's permission. Though she read them, she never wrote back. However, she felt a faint relief whenever she heard about Rebecca's recovery. At Emma's birthday party, Thomas took Heather's hand and, gazing at the flowers blooming in the garden, said, "I couldn't have recovered without you and Emma. We'll grow even stronger," Heather smiled. "Perhaps it was because of these trials that we became a real family." Through the window, they could see Emma being held by her grandmother Linda, happily clutching the stuffed dog. It was like a small symbol of hope beyond past pain. "People can change," Heather said quietly. "Yes," Thomas nodded. "We can hurt, and we can heal. The choice is our own." The soft light of dusk enveloped them as a new chapter of life quietly began.